Okay, fine. I'm ready with God's help.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So I'm going to introduce Rabbi Weiss today. Today we have Rabbi Yisrol Dovid Weiss is an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, a spokesman for Neturei Karta International, Jews United Against Zionism. He travels worldwide to exploring that not only is the state of Israel a violation of international law, but also that the whole Zionist ideology is built on a rebellion against the Almighty. He is constantly clarifying the difference between Judaism and Zionism, which Zionism is a transformation of Judaism from a religion to nationalism. Rabbi Weiss attends frequently in international pro-Palestinian conferences, meets with high-ranking Muslim and Arab dignitaries, and has a history of building bridges between Arab and Jewish communities in an effort of restoring the historic, beautiful coexistence between Arabs and Jews in all Muslim countries. He stresses always that the traditional pious Jews who observe the teachings of the Torah, the people of the book, take no part in the oppression against the Palestinian people. On the contrary, they oppose it in the strongest terms and constantly pray for the speedy and peaceful dismantling of the state of Israel at the time when we all will once again be able to live in peace and harmony. Rabbi Weiss visited Gaza, Turkey, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Iran, Yemen, Qatar, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Africa, all the major European countries, and more to participate in conferences, lecturing in universities, speaking for the masses, and personally meeting with many religious and governmental leaders. He spoke at the UN Conference on Racism at Durban, South Africa in 2001, and much more. He visited Gaza in July and December of 2009 as part of an aid convoy to the suffering Palestinians. Neturei Karta International is an apolitical religious organization committed to publicizing the viewpoint of masses of anti-Zionist Orthodox Jews worldwide who strongly oppose the state of Israel and its actions. Neturei Karta International has reached in the past great achievements and is well known worldwide. Welcome, Rabbi Weiss. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege. And inshallah, I pray to the Almighty that He should bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may convey His message. And so, inshallah, sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. Amen. I'm humbled. I appreciated how succinctly you stated well, to me, the obvious, all these facts, the difference between Judaism and Zionism. And of course, it's critical. And I'm just returning right now from Manhattan, where we went to the Iranian embassy to
Oh, wow.
convey the hurt of the Jewish people of what the Zionists, the vicious attack on Iran. And basically,
Amazing.
yeah, so, and that we've heard from people from Iran, the Jewish community, and, they're also hurting about this. And it's just tragic. It's a Nakba. And we can get
hmm
into that if you'd like, to explain this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we can dive into like what are the distinctions between Judaism and Zionism, and can you elaborate on why, from your perspective, Zionism contradicts the Jewish faith?
Right? So, with the help of the Almighty, Judaism is a religion of 3,000 years to be subservient to God. It's a covenant that the Jewish people made with God. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses took the Torah from God on Mount Sinai, and we swore our allegiance, a covenant to uphold all the laws of the Torah, the 613 commandments of the Torah. And this is all what Judaism is, and there's never been a gap in this history of Judaism. It's been passed down from generation to generation, and as it very clearly states in the Torah, we are forbidden to add or subtract from the Torah. We have to adhere to strictly to the words of God and the Torah, never even one letter changing from that Torah. That is what Judaism is. While Zionism is a movement of 140, 150 years, in that range, where it is a basic nationalism. It's a transformation from this godly covenant into a base material nationalism, totally the diametric opposite of what Judaism. Judaism is spirituality, subservience to God. Zionism is a materialistic goal, a movement of people who are aspiring for a base nationalist homeland, and the two just the twain shall never meet. It's totally contradictory. Godliness is something which is that one gives of oneself, and this nationalism is one takes for oneself. So, in the essence of Zionism is rooted in blasphemy. For instance, their selfish goal of having a piece of land ignores the rights of others. The root of the Zionism states that when a religious person will meet the Zionist and he'll say, "Hey, what are you doing? This in the Torah it says that we're forbidden since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago. Jews are forbidden to reestablish any Jewish homeland, even if it would be properly practicing the religion." And so they'll say, "Yeah, but we need a land to protect. We need a land and guns and things to protect us." So he said, "What do you mean? We have God. That's what the Jewish religion is. We believe in God." So they laugh and they scorn at us and they say, "Where was God in the Crusades and Inquisition? And where was God by Hitler?" and so forth. So they laugh at that, the whole concept of this religion, of believing that there's an almighty, an awesome God who protects, and that everything happens only through his will. And even a tsunami and an earthquake and a plague and all the good and all the lush, the produce of everything that happens, good and bad, is only from the will of the Almighty. They laugh at that. And they say we have to have a gun to protect us. So it's rooted, the whole concept of Zionism is rooted in blasphemy. But that is the concept, the ideology behind the creation of the state. But in essence, when they came to fruition of creating the state, so they're breaching the basic laws of the Torah, that God foresaw that there will be people who will be impatient with the way the Almighty rules the world, and that we're dispersed amongst all the nations. And they will come one day after the destruction of the temple, where God, again, as I said, stated clearly to the Jewish people that we're forbidden to reestablish a national home. So they just ignore all of this, and they decide that because they feel it's necessary for their goal, they're going to create this national home. So they breach the laws of the Torah. Let me clarify that. King Solomon was the one who built the temple, and he wrote a book of prophecy called Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, where he wrote that the Jews are under 3 oaths of God. One oath is that we should not, once God disperses us amongst the nations and was spread into exile, which he foresaw, even though he was well before the concept of exile, but this is prophecy. So he said that once we're dispersed amongst the nations, we are forbidden to return en masse, in large numbers, to the Holy Land. Secondly, we are not to make any attempt, we are not to rebel against any nation. We are to be loyal citizens in every country we reside. If we're living in Iran, if we're living in the United States, if we're living in Canada, Egypt, wherever you would like, we have to be loyal citizens. And even if sometimes the countries that we are residing in treat the Jews unfairly, like they tax them more than others, or they don't permit them to buy a land, still in all, a Jew is required to be a loyal citizen, pray for the well-being of that country, and deal with their leaders with respect and humbleness. This is with humility. So basically, this is the basics of Judaism, and we've been practicing this for 2,000 years, as our rabbis taught us. Zionism, that was the second thing. So we're not allowed to return en masse, not to rebel against nations, and thirdly, not to make any attempt to end exile, because we believe that the Almighty put us into exile because we were not worthy, we were not on that high level of spirituality necessary to be in the Holy Land as a nation. As individuals, we were permitted by God to live throughout the hundreds and literally thousands of years under different leaderships of different, whoever it was, the Greeks and the Ottoman Empire, wherever we were as individuals, we got to, but not to establish a Jewish sovereignty. So this was accepted by Jews, and we, for 2,000 years, although we went through the Inquisition and Crusades and all so much hardships, we never, under the leadership of Jewish rabbis, the leadership of, that's what Judaism is, it's a religion, so it was under the Jewish rabbis, the Jewish authority, and they always told their followers and the people of the Jewish world that they should not attempt to return en masse and do not attempt to reestablish any Jewish sovereignty in any part of the world. Jews obeyed this. So we went through the Inquisition, and there was times it was called the Golden Age of Judaism. We had the capability of establishing the state, but we never did such a thing. Zionism came along, a movement of people who are non-religious, and it's most of them that were totally estranged from God. I like to show pictures of the Zionist movement when the historic moment of the establishment of the state. David Ben-Gurion reading the Declaration of Independence in Independence Hall in 1948. So this is that historical moment, and you can see this is the dais where Ben-Gurion is standing there, the first prime minister, a picture of Theodor Herzl on the wall, and the Star of David on the wall. They're making a state of Israel, a Jewish state, and on the dais you don't see people covering their heads. Who's talking about they don't have beards and payas? Imagine making the Muslim state without imams, ayatollahs, sheikhs. Imagine making a Christian state without any priests. This is the picture of this Jewish state that they're creating. So you see the hypocrisy, the duplicity, the falseness of this so-called Jewish state. A Jew is required to cover their head. It's a law in the Jewish books that a Jew is required to cover one head all the time to show, we call it a yarmulke. We wear this all the time, even the house. When we go out, when we go we pray, we put on a hat. But we always wear something on our head to show. Yarmulke is an acronym for Yorei Malka, fearing of the king, to show that we believe there's a king, there's a God above us, and that's a requirement. And here they're making the so-called Jewish state, and they're flaunting their total disregard for the Jewish law and for God and so forth. Then they made the language called Ivrit, modern Hebrew. Why didn't they use the language of the Torah, Lashon Kodesh, the holy language? Because in every manner they disdained and hated the Jewish religion. So they were totally trying to transform this concept, what Judaism is, from a religion to a nationalism void of godliness, gutting the name Judaism from godliness and creating a facade in order just to gain support from the world. So they use the Torah, the Bible, they wave it as a deed to the land, and they claim God gave us the land, knowing that they'll gain the support of the evangelistic Christians and the Jews who don't know their religion, because unfortunately most Jews don't even keep the 10 Commandments, don't keep the Sabbath. So they knew the masses, they'll play on their emotions and claim, we have the right to the land. God gave us the land. And they know, many of these leaders know clearly that it is expressly forbidden for Jews since the destruction of the temple to reestablish the land. But who cares? They have nothing to do with God. They've totally, ignored the laws of the Torah and just laugh at that. So they create the state. And another issue is so that we have the root of the Zionism is rooted in blasphemy, that God can't protect us. You'll ask any Zionist, they say, we need an insurance policy, we need the land, we need guns. What about
in America?
The fact that God protects us? Come on. Yeah, and then in America. Well, then but God foresaw this, so He put us under oaths. He said, "Don't return en masse, don't rebel against any nation." But they laugh at that because they don't have the morals of God, and they don't. Now, on top of all of this, they have the fact that we as Jews are required to show gratefulness to kindness that has been done to us. It's a basics of Judaism. Our whole Torah encompasses laws that require us to do kindness, to emulate God, just as God is compassionate. You should be compassionate, and required for us to show appreciation for good done to us. Now, it was the Muslim nations through these hundreds of years when Jews were being massacred. They tried to forcefully convert them by the Crusades and so many other times in the history of Europe. And there was the blood libels, and it was the Muslim countries that embraced the Jews, and Jews flourished from Iran to Tunisia to Yemen to Morocco, and every place, Egypt, Jews in Lebanon, wherever you'd like, Jews lived, flourished as the distinctly religious Jews. And even though we have a distinctly different religion, it wasn't an impediment of coexistence. There was no United Nations, there was no human rights protection, yet we flourished and lived together amongst Muslims, babysat each other's children, lived in total harmony. I'm not saying there were never any bumps in the road. That is a fact, there were, but But if you'll take Europe and compare it to the Arab countries, see what we went through in Europe. Even in England, there was Jews were massacred. There was York, where Jews were massacred, and on and on and on. But basically, we lived together for hundreds and hundreds of years in the Arab and Muslim land. Take the Ottoman Empire, where the Jews were embraced. We flourished in Istanbul. We flourished in Al-Quds in Jerusalem. I carry around a picture to show just a symbolic picture how Jews and Arabs lived together as in the same courtyards, babysat each other's children, and were so kind to each other, helped each other in business, and so on. This is a fact. You ask any old Muslim, any old Jew, and they'll have their own anecdotes of how we lived together. So the difference of religion has nothing to do with the conflict, has nothing to do with an impediment to coexistence. The problem that we are facing is the creation of the selfish nationalist movement called Zionism of 140 years that simply wants to establish their rule over a land, and it disregards the anything that stands in its way. They're ready to sacrifice on the altar of their goal any person, whether it's the Muslims, whether it's the Palestinians, or whoever stands in their way, or the Jews who are demonstrating literally for now 77 years. They're demonstrating, they're getting brutally beaten. We never carry guns, we never carry weapons. We demonstrate peacefully in the streets of Jerusalem, in the streets of occupied Palestine, and the army brutally beats them, arrests them, assassinates these Jews who are simply speaking up and saying to the Zionists, you don't belong here. You have no right over the land. You have no right to occupy. And they have, whether it's old rabbis or young children, this is what we're witnessing day in and day out for 77 years. They literally trample them, smash their heads. They drive into them with cars. They spray them with it's called stink water. It's chemicals that ruin their clothes in order to discourage demonstrations. In Columbia University, they just sprayed this last year. 2 people sprayed some other people, and they got sick, and it was a big scandal. And it turned out to be Israelis, because this is what they're proficient in. This is what they do for 77 years to the Jewish people. So we are used to this. Jews refuse to go to the Israeli army. We have boys and girls. It's mandatory military service. But our boys and girls refuse to go, so they get arrested. Even behind bars, they psychologically torture them. They put them on the Israeli uniform. Here you see a girl crying and saying prayers with her prayer books. And this is the demonstrations ongoing you have, and this is in the front of Congress. This is in New York, in Foley Square. This is in front of the White House. You have literally tens and tens of thousands of Jews around the world, and it's hundreds of thousands. They are obeying the Torah. They are therefore in total opposition, not only to what the massacre, the carnage, the genocide of Gaza now, but the existence of this bogus Jewish state called the Zionist state of Israel. Here you see the acceptance of the chief rabbi. You see the Zionists, one of their ploys is constantly to present themselves as I said, representing Judaism. They use the Bible, they claim it in the name of God. They use the Star of David. They call themselves Israel, which is Jacob, the state of Israel. And then they made a rabbinate. So we have our rabbinates. We had our rabbinates in the 1920s and earlier. We had the rabbis. Here you see the chief rabbi at that time in 1920s, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld of blessed memory. And he met with the king of Transjordan and said, and presented the view of all the Jews of Jerusalem. And he said, we don't aspire to take over the land. He wrote this in Arabic in the newspapers, and he met with the Arab Congress and on and on. He passed on. The next chief rabbi was Rabbi Dushinsky of blessed memory. And he pleaded with, he was in the time of the beginning of the establishment of the state. So he pleaded with the United Nations in 1947, a little prior to the ratification of the state of Israel by the United Nations in 1948. In 1947, July 1947, this is United Nations documents, he said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. We don't want any state. And he wasn't anti-Semitic, by the way. He was the leader of the Jewish community, and he said, this is not what we want. This is not our religion. And this is what the Jews were and are. The ones who are true to the Torah. We are against the establishment of the state. It's bogus Judaism. It's masquerading in our Jewish facade, but it is nothing to do with the true Judaism. When he passed on, this is where they're taking up another chief rabbi. You see the tens and tens of thousands gathering in the streets of Jerusalem to greet the new chief rabbi. And so on. That's going on, and the demonstrations continue till today, and the tens of thousands. And this is what we're living, facing, and we will not be silenced. These are the streets of Jerusalem. You see the boys putting up signs of Palestinian flags on the walls. These are the streets of Jerusalem. They're marching in the streets of Jerusalem and other places where you see here Palestine. Here you see it says, "Stop Zionist terrorist massacre in Gaza." These are in the streets of Jerusalem. They're waving Palestinian flags. Palestinians wouldn't dare to do this, but the Jewish people do this, and they get beaten and arrested. So this is basically what we are living and breathing. Our trying to correct and to clarify to the world that they are being conned, they're being duped by a powerful satanic movement, but it's not godly, it's not religious, and it's unacceptable, and we cry and hurt with the people of Palestine.
And when you say satanic movement, and I heard, you say it a lot in a lot of your interviews, could you elaborate when you say this is a satanic movement, Zionism is a satanic movement? Could you sort of elaborate on that?
Yeah, because we are groping for a word that can somehow encompass and explain when you are watching for now over 20 months people standing and taking pot shots, shooting and targeting people who are starving and running, looking for a little sustenance, a little water, a little food, and they're being shot at day in and day out. Reporters who come are murdered, over 200 reporters. Medical personnel who are coming to try to save the lives of people who are tortured with pain because they don't have any cortisone or whatever it may be, and they're being murdered daily. This is inhumane. There's no words. What word should we use and what is it if it's not satanic? This is not Judaism, of course. Like I say, Judaism says in the Torah, you have to emulate God. But they have nothing with Judaism. I mean, it's not like I think that I have a problem because it's some Jewish movement that all of a sudden has doing something wrong. It was never a Jewish movement. The rabbis, we compiled a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, which is a compilation of 130 years, this is 10 years old or whatever, maybe, of all the rabbis in Europe and around the world. I always like to show this is one of the leading rabbis from the Sephardic Jews. That means from Middle Eastern countries, Africa, and all this. So you have from Morocco, Baba Sali, Rabbi Yisrol Abu Chatzira, very, very famous. Everybody respects him in the Jewish Sephardic world. And he stated he lived from before the Zionist state, and he from 1890. until 1984, and he stated, I hereby join the great rabbis of the Sephardic Eidah Haredis in the holy city of Jerusalem. The Eidah Haredis means the God-fearing community. He said, I join the great rabbis of the Sephardic God-fearing community in the holy city of Jerusalem in support of their Torah ruling that it is forbidden to participate in the governmental elections because it is against our holy Torah. This was the view of the rabbis around the world. We have here, this is the Skolena Rebbe of Romania, who lived from
Are they all
1896
part of the Neturei Karta
no,
or
no,
no?
no. This is
Oh,
just the
okay.
view of anybody, the view of people who are true to the Torah religion, the Torah, the Jewish religion, to the Torah, that the covenant that God made with us. Neturei Karta is a movement of people who are very vocal, outspoken in their opposition to Zionism, but it is only the ones who are broadcasting, are trying to promulgate, to explain to the world the view and the ideology of basic Judaism. And whether it is a Sephardic Jews from any of the Sephardic countries, like I say, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Yemen, or Yemen is Yemenite Jews. We have rabbis from Yemen also. All these rabbis, all from the Ashkenazic. Ashkenazic means from the European countries. Now, Zionism came from the European countries. They came from Vienna, Austria. Theodor Herzl came from there. Chaim Weizmann, the first one, came from England. He was there, and basically, all these people were all the leaders of the Jewish communities, wherever they were, said, "Whoa, what is this movement? This movement is not Judaism. It's like I said,
Exactly.
it's an ersatz Judaism. It's a base nationalism. What does it have to do with our covenant with God? It's a contradiction to our covenant with God." So they many men put out their statements in every shape and form. I always quote from the Ashkenazic world, and again, nobody can refute the people who I'm mentioning. For instance, the Chafetz Chaim, his name was Rabbi Yisrol Meir Cohen. He was from 1839 to 1933, so he passed away 15 years before the state. But Zionism was well into its blossoming time, and he
Could you
stated,
remind, I'm sorry, could you let people know, a lot of people want to know what the name of the book is. If you can just remind everyone.
The Rabbis Speak Out. It's a compilation, short statements of the leading Torah authorities from around the world, from at the beginning of Zionism till today. So here you have, like this Rabbi Yisrol Meir Cohen stated, he spoke like a metaphor. He said, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. This Zionist movement causes the entire body of Judaism to rot. Now, he's a codifier of Jewish law that everybody in all the communities around the Jewish world who are religious uses his books and relies on his books, on his law books. I'm just giving examples of so many of the others. Each one in their style spoke out against Zionism. So Zionism is as I say, a antithetical. It is really the contradiction, like the difference between black and white is the difference between Judaism and Zionism. Yet
Wow.
Zionism, in order to give themselves this legitimacy, they made a rabbinate, so they have their chief rabbis who traipse around the world too, a Sephardic and Ashkenaz chief rabbi, and so they, of course, they take scholars who are bad apples, which you can always find a scholar who's a rotten apple from tens of thousands, and they pay them well, and they give them this respect, they give them this position, rabbinate they made, and chief rabbi, and the whole thing is a charade. The whole thing is a farce, because the Jewish communities that was thriving, that had been flourishing through the hundreds of years in Jerusalem and in the Holy Land, in Palestine, these were people living together with the Muslims, with the Arabs, without any political aspirations, nationalist aspirations, and they were against this. Who asked them to come? These guys are interlopers who came from Europe with this evil intention of transforming Judaism into nationalism, and that is what their constant striving and something like totally ignoring the voice of the the most respected Torah authorities that were living both in Jerusalem and around the world. So they come along, and wherever they go, you will find that the very religious communities, the Ivy League of Jewish teaching, whether it's the streets of Jerusalem where they have brisk, and there's Harvard and so forth. There's in Jerusalem. There's brisk. And these are like school systems or many others and they're all anti-Zionist. They come wherever you will go. As I say, it doesn't matter if you come to England. So you will go to Stamford Hills. That's where the very religious Jewish community is. You can see for yourself. If you drive around, look, where is the very fervently religious Jewish community? It's in Stamford Hills and 16. You go to Canada, it's next to Montreal. You will come to New York. It's right across from Manhattan, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, right across from Manhattan. It's the most concentrated, the largest concentration of religious Jews. And you won't find a single Israeli flag in miles and miles around and around. You'll see Jews dressed as I do, all the women dressed modestly because that's what Judaism requires. Now, if you and the same thing you go, like wherever you go, if you go to in Argentina or you go to Australia, wherever you will go, the very religious community is anti-Zionist. That said, the more you estrange yourself from the religion, you go to what they call compromised religion. You go to, in other words, modern Orthodox. I'm not even talking about the non-religious. I'm thinking if you go to the non-religious, of course, they're strongly Zionist, to many of them. There happens to be a large movement of people who, because of human rights issues, they're totally against Zionism from the Jewish communities. But I'm talking for the ones who are the great supporters of Zionism, it's because they're not religious. So their Judaism became a nationalism. It's not something entirely different. That's not what our religion is. God gave us a religion to serve God. By them, they proudly declare they're a democracy. That's what they say. The only democracy in the Middle East, which is, of course, ironically and sadly, totally not a democracy, the way they mistreat the Palestinian people and the way they mistreat the Jews who are opposed to them. But that's another issue. But let's just say they claim they're a democracy. How dare a Jewish person declare he's a democracy? You're not. We don't have democracy in Judaism. You must serve God. You have to keep the Sabbath. You have to eat kosher. You're not free to do what you want. So it's full of contradictions in what they're stating. To the world, they say, God gave us the land. And then then they turn around and say, oh, we're a democracy. You don't have to eat kosher. You can do what you want. Whoa, how does these two fit together? And I've heard this from, it's just, if anybody will just take the time and effort to think about what we're dealing here, you will find that they're just a hot air balloon. There's nothing in there. It's full of contradictions and falsehoods. So their establishment is established on against the will of the inhabitants. Their establishment is predicated and built on the suffering of others and on a rebellion against God. And the Jewish communities around the world hurt when we see what is being done in our name. Again, if they wanted to make a country and declare themselves the country of Zionism or the country of something, leave us out of this. Leave my religion out of this. Don't use us as your stick to hurt other people, to rebel against God. But they're using it because they know without using the name Judaism, without using the Torah as a deed, nobody will give them the right to take the land away from the Palestinians. And everybody who will be up will speak up, but they know they use a second weapon, which is called anti-Semitism. What they do is they have this terrible weapon, this nuclear weapon called anti-Semitism. So they go, and if anybody dares say, what are we looking at? How could we watch how children day in and day out just cold-bloodedly murdered? They're going for food. You see them crying and begging for food, and the floors that everybody sees. And yet the world is silent. Why? Because they've dehumanized the people of Palestine in the eyes of the world by claiming that they're evil, that they're anti-Semitic. How dare they say that? I mean, using such is an insult to common sense, to the base, the logic and that God blessed the human being with, how could they say that these people are haters of Jews when they're simply children and old and women and so the whole thing is just an insult to the logic, to the basics of humanity, and yet they're screaming anti-Semitism. But not only that, it's an attack on the religious Jews because, for instance, in my case, my families, we came from Eastern Europe, from Hungary and Poland, and all our communities, many in the United States and Europe, where my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz. My father escaped when the Nazis came to Hungary. My mother's family was mostly from Poland. They were decimated. They were murdered. Their families, my first cousins, my aunt, all the majority of our relatives were murdered by the Nazis. So the world started talking about something called anti-Semitism, that you should have a word that should be like a red line, a warning sign, that if people start attacking Jews because of their religion, they could call out anti-Semitism and the world will take notice. But if somebody comes along and decides selfishly to take the land from others and murders and kills and oppresses, and then if somebody steps in and says, stop it, what you're doing, so they say, you're anti-Semitic, and they start making the laws accusing them about being anti-Semitic, they've taken that word anti-Semitism, they've made it valueless, so if there's, God forbid, true anti-Semitism, nobody will take heed. Secondly, being that they're using the word anti-Semitism for their selfish reasons, so now people equate and conflate Judaism with Zionism, because everybody says you're anti-Semitic if you're opposed to the Zionist state. So people think automatically that every religious Jew is in support of their evil, of their oppression of the Palestinian people. So when I go traveling around the world, the people go with Jewish garb, we are looked at with hate because of the Zionist evil, what they're doing. So when they're using that word anti-Semitism, it's a criminal against the Jewish people who are Jews and who have nothing to do with the evil perpetrated by the Zionists. So we should have a class action suit against the governments who maybe mean well, but they're lazy and they're not studying the true definition of anti-Semitism, and they're simply buying into the Zionist propaganda. So now we are suffering as Jews because of that. So in many, many forms and shapes, the abuse of the word anti-Semitism is evil to its core. It's repugnant. But that's a weapon of the Zionists, and it's a false weapon, and it's a red herring, whatever you want to use, gaslighting, all the nice terminologies they use for it, but it is evil, and Zionism to its core is evil in every aspect and a rebellion against God in every aspect. And Jews around the world, as I say, true to the Torah, we hurt, we are frustrated, we are humiliated what is being done in our name, and we will not relinquish, with God's help, our religion for this ersatz Judaism, for this nationalist, selfish, flawed political movement called the Zionist State of Israel.
Rabbi, I just wanted to say thank you very much.
1 second, brother. We're 1 second, please. Thank you. You answered my second question, and so my last question before we open it up to the panel. You recently came out with a video condemning Israel for their attacks on Iran. How do you respond to those who view Iran or Gaza as threats to the Jewish people, including those living in Israel?
Well, with God's help, what does it mean, that word threat? We are talking about people who have been driven from their homes, mostly in Gaza. They've suffered so much. And why have they suffered? What have they done wrong? They had simply been living in their land and even helping the Jewish people, and the Jewish people conversely have been helping them. They've been living together. And because of a movement that decided that they're going to have their land, they've been driven into Gaza. They suffered so much. These people are the enemies of Jews? Why? What have they done wrong? Why are we labeling them as villains when they're victims? The people of Iran, Jews lived for hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years in Iran. We flourished amongst them. And when the Islamic Republic of Iran was established, the Ayatollah Khomeini clearly differentiated between Judaism, the religion, and the Jewish people who practiced the religion, and between that and Zionism. So he had a lot of statements where he writes and he says, we are opposed to Zionism because it's a selfish, unacceptable, evil occupation, but I'm not against Jews. So the Jewish communities continue to flourish in Iran. We've had the pleasure and the honor to visit Iran many times, and we went to their synagogues. We went to pray there. We used the mikveh, the different facilities of the Jewish communities. We went to Tehran, to Isfahan, to Yazd, and of course in Shiraz there's the Jewish community. On and on. The Jews live there as Jews because why? Because Iran is not against Jews, but Iran is deemed a threat by the Zionist state of Israel because they clearly differentiate between occupation and Judaism. They clearly state we have nothing against Judaism. They are able to be baited by the Zionists in their way that they want everybody to say the Jews. So when everybody says the Jews did this, oh, you're anti-Semitic. You're anti-Semitic. And that way they disqualify any voice of humanity, any human rights groups, or they politicians who stand up, who show sympathy for the Palestinian people, they get slaughtered politically. It's like committing political suicide if they stand up for Palestine. This is across the board in any European country and in the United States. That's a fact. There's books written about this. Congressmen wrote books about this and so on, because that's a fact. The confusion between Judaism and Zionism is one of the ploys, the basic ploy of the Zionists and the abuse of the Holocaust, because people feel that guilt, that the world was silent when the Jews were being massacred for 5 years and more by the Nazis, and they were silent. So they use this guilt in order to be able to glean support from the world to establish their homeland. If anybody speaks up, they say, where were you by the Nazis? Why don't you give the Jews a little resting area, a place to be? And they totally, of course, ignore the fact that by establishing that state there, they simply went into somebody else's home and took the home away from other people. And that's just the opposite of what Judaism is. And it's forbidden according to Judaism. So it's so ironic, Jews who have suffered under the hands of persecution of others should go ahead and do exactly that to other people. But it's not Judaism. It's an evil satanic force that's ignoring every word of God and using every tool of evil in order to establish a selfish homeland that totally ignores the good of others, and therefore we call it satanic.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Weiss, for answering my questions. I'm going to open up the panel now. I know we just have a little bit of time left, so we'll try to keep it one question. We'll start off with Linda. Go ahead, Linda.
Salam, Rabbi. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for your advocacy. My question is as follows. In recent times, Zionists have spun this narrative claiming that it wasn't the Palestinians who welcomed European Jewish people into the land after World War II, and that they in fact wanted them gone from the very beginning. What is your opinion on this theory, which suggests that Arabs or Muslims possess this ingrained hate towards Jewish people?
So let's just understand, when did the coexistence of Jews and Arabs, Jews and Muslims start? Did it start by Second World War, or did it start for hundreds and hundreds of years that we have the Rambam, Maimonides, and many other, the great people, the Baba Sali, as I mentioned, going back to just recent time, or there's so many between. that we lived and flourished in every Arab and Muslim country. You can go there. I mean, we visit these countries. You can see the cemeteries. I just had the privilege of being in Morocco and in Egypt and Tunisia. These Jewish communities flourished amongst these communities that are supposed to be our enemies, that have this ingrained hate to Jews. Islam, I don't think, was created by World War II. As far as I know, Islam was way, way back over 1,000 years. And yet, and so these Arabs have this religion, and Jews lived amongst them with this distinctly different religion. And yet we coexisted. Not only we coexisted, but we flourished amongst them. In fact, in Yemen, I could give you, I was in Yemen, and the fact is, in Iran, the Muslims are not allowed to use alcohol. Jewish people are permitted to use alcohol, even though they're very stringent about not using alcohol in their communities. Do they? So there's the fact on the ground belies the Zionist propaganda, the narrative of Zionism. We have been coexisting. Again, I will repeat, we're human beings, and also everything is from God. Things happen, that there's God, as we are warned in the Torah, if there is a decree against Jews, we are to gather in the synagogues and be introspective and see why there's a decree against us, and fast and do better our ways, and then try to placate the leaders. There is sometimes decrees against Jews, but to state that there is an ingrained hate and that the Muslims and the Arabs didn't embrace the Jews, that is patently false, and that's repugnant. Because, as I say, Jews, when they were suffering in Europe, they found a safe haven amongst the Arabs and Muslim people. Again, I'm not saying it was perfect, but we did live in all the Arab and Muslim lands and in Palestine. And I have many old rabbis, and many, they should live to 120, and many who passed on, and not only old rabbis, just laymen and people. Each one will tell how they lived in the streets of Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, and they helped. They lived in the same courtyard, babysat each other's children, and lived together. How could one totally dismiss this? How could one state that it's not true when it's the facts on the ground? You'll ask Muslims and you'll ask Jews. We always live together. So this Zionist narrative that the Jews came by World War II and they were hated by the Arabs. Now let's understand. Zionism came up in the beginning of the 1900s. And in the 1890s, they decided on their move that they're going to establish their state. So when they first came, the Arabs actually didn't see anything wrong with them. They thought that just like the other Jewish populace that was living there, and they sold them land and so forth. All of a sudden, they became aware that this is a movement that has an insidious plan to take over the land from the inhabitants. So all of a sudden they felt this threat of these people, and that threat was real. The Zionists came and they started inciting. There was the Der Yassin. There was attacks on Der Yassin. They slaughtered them, and this was way before World War II. And they waited and they incited and did everything they could. They went to the Kosel, that's the Wailing Wall. And they went there and they started dancing there, and they said the wall is ours. They danced, by the way, boys and girls together, which is forbidden. And on the day that Jews mourn and fast the destruction of the temple, they went and ate and made meals, and this against God, against everything that's Jewish, and said the wall is ours, and this is our area. They went and they searched to incite the Muslim populace. There happens to be that the rabbis for hundreds of years would go to the Western Wall and pray, and it would be the Waqf, that was the ones who are in control of the Western Wall and that area of the Temple Mount. They allowed the Jews always to go up there and pray, as we did for all the time. We, by the way, Jews are forbidden to go onto the Temple Mount because since the destruction of the temple, we are lacking the pureness to do that. It's a certain system of purification that we don't have. Yet the Zionists, and it says that we're cut off from God. It's considered one of the worst sins to go up on that area. So the Zionists went up, and Sharon went up with 1,000 soldiers because he had a political statement to make on the area of the Holy Temple, where we're forbidden to go. It's considered we're cut off from God. It's haram. this is what the Zionists do, because they totally scorn God and the Torah. They have an agenda, a political agenda of taking over, but nothing with it. So of course, by World War II, when the Jews who were in refugee camps, and many of them, when they were searching a place to go, and this was after 50 years of inciting the people of Palestine and threatening them with taking over the place. Of course, they were afraid of these masses that were coming up, and so it had nothing to do because they were against Jews. That's somebody who's looking into a little a keyhole in a door, and he sees a stick hitting, and he says, "Wow, look at that stick hitting somebody. Boy, what type of stick? That must be witchcraft." If you would just open the door, you see there's a hand behind this stick, right? We were living together. Everything was fine and dandy. It wasn't all of a sudden because of a hate of Jews. It was because of the establishment of Zionism. So when the Secretary General, by October 7th, said it didn't come out of a vacuum, what did the Zionists say? Fire him. He should retire. And of course, he's anti-Semitic. They really think we're done with imbeciles. They insult the intelligence of the world, and people are afraid. The ones who do understand are afraid to speak up because they're so vicious against the world body that the people don't know how to handle this issue. And unfortunately, they're successful. The professors lose their tenure, the students get expelled, and they lose, the whole future gets lost. Why? Because they're standing up and saying, we can't see this evil being perpetrated against innocent people. And they use my religion to do this. God protect us. And they claim that the Arabs hate us. We can't look at Palestinians in the face anymore because we are so ashamed. These are the people that we loved and lived together with. How dare they take these innocent people and claim they hate the Jews when they were the ones who we lived together with, and as I say, afforded us a safe haven. There's something so evil in this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Linda, for your question. We'll go to Rebecca. And Rebecca, this again, just one question, and then he'll answer it. And that says not a debate. So go ahead. I'm going to open your mic. Please be respectful.
Hi. Ich habe gewohnt in Williamsburg bei Wally Friedman. Weißt Wally?
Well, maybe you should ask your question in
What
English.
is
I know you know Yiddish. I hear very well. I'm very impressed.
Yeah.
But maybe you should speak English so that people can understand what you're asking.
So I lived by Wally Friedman. He's very famous in Williamsburg. I went to Beis Ruchel of Satmar. Now, one question. We understand, both of us, that when Mashiach kommt, when Messiah comes, we will get Israel back with Hashem, the correct way, and not through Zionism. What does that entail according to the Torah? What would happen to the Arabs and any women who dress in a non-religious Jewish way? And let's say an adulterous woman, what kind of Torah? We would go back to Torah times when the Messiah comes and Hashem gives us back Israel. What would happen to the non-Jews that the Torah says would happen to the non-Jews, like the people on this panel?
Okay.
In your opinion, what would happen to them in the Torah that your school
You said it like 5
times. For the sake of time, you're repeating it again and again, so I hear your question.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, so that's a very important issue to speak about because people think, okay, I've heard that the Jews, they are aspiring to take over the land, but they're going to do it in the future. Let's understand clearly. Every religion has their concept of the Mashiach and Messiah. Us as Jews, we believe that one day the Almighty, with His compassion, will make a metaphysical change in the world. There will be a spirit of repentance. All the Jews will repent, and everybody, hoping that you do dress modestly. Everybody will dress modestly. There will be a repentance. There will be, all the world will come together and stop being atheists, and everybody will serve God in harmony. The United Nations, I carry this with me right across from the United Nations. It's called the Isaiah Wall. It's very famous. We stand there and demonstrate many times at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. And there's a verse from Isaiah that it says, they shall beat the swords into plowshares and the spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Yes, that's our future. We believe that the Almighty will make this revelation of His glory, and all the world, it says, all the nations will join together and serve God in harmony. We aspire, we yearn for this, and we pray for this in all our prayers. The prayers are in English and in Arabic and in every other language. You look at our Jewish prayers, we are always yearning to return to the Holy Land. It's not a hidden secret. We are yearning to return, but our yearning is not for a piece of real estate. If I would just pray, we say the coming year in Jerusalem, every Jew says that every year on the Passover. So if that would be the issue, we could just buy a ticket and go to Jerusalem. That's not the issue. Our yearning is the closeness to God that we had when we went into the Holy Land and King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech built the temple. But God felt we were not on that level, and we were sent into exile because of our sins, as we say in our prayers. If you're a Jewish religious person, you say, because of our sins, we were dispersed amongst the nations. Not that we were so evil, but we were not on that high level of holiness. Therefore, God dispersed us amongst the nations, and we have to serve God, and it serves the dual purpose, our being dispersed amongst the nations, that if we're ideally serving God properly, it will be as a medicine that God will accept our repentance. And at the same time, we are, by serving God amongst the nations, it will be a revelation for the nations to also serve God. Now, not that they should become Jewish, but everybody should serve God. Ultimately, but we are expressly forbidden, while we are in exile, to make any physical attempts to return and take over the land. This can only happen when God will make this miracle, that the world will change and all humanity will agree that it's the will of God, and they will all go together and serve God. That is why when the Jews suffered by the Inquisition and Crusades, these Muslim people were great scholars. Everybody who knows the history, not the Zionist narrative, but the true history, knows that the Muslims in Cordova and all these they were great scholars. And they knew the Jewish religion, and they therefore knew that the Jews aspire to return. It's no secret. I'm not embarrassed of this. But we know also the Muslims aspire to what they aspire to. But we have no difficulty to coexist, because it is not an impediment for us to coexist, because we're not a threat, because we have no aspiration to take a gun in our hands and take over the land. That is expressly forbidden. We are to be peaceful, to be kind, to constantly emulate God and live together with the Muslims, with the Arabs, with the Christians, to live as good people, as godly people. And then one day, God, with His compassion, will come and build a temple, and all the world will serve Him. The Muslims will say, "Whoa, we don't believe in that. We believe in another future that will happen at the end of time." So the Christian comes along and he says, no, he believes in what he believes. We as Jews, this is our belief. We are very certain this is what will happen, but it's not a threat. That's why we are living with the Muslims, and we always have lived with the Muslims, because our future is etched on the wall from Isaiah right across the United Nations. It's etched in our verses. It's etched in our hearts. We have no problem of coexistence, and we are not a threat to anybody. The Zionists, they turned things on its head. They took things out of context. They've taken statements, although it's so duplicit, it's so counterfeit and so hypocritical, because they don't have anything with God. If they would have with God, they wouldn't be busy beating religious Jews in the streets of Jerusalem mercilessly for 77 years. If they would be Jewish, as they're supposed to be, they would keep the Sabbath. You wouldn't see cars going up and down the streets on the Sabbath. But they have nothing with Judaism. It's a charade. But they're using the religion to intimidate and silence the voice of humanity, what we call godliness. So yes, we aspire for going back. And the Satmar Rebbe, you lived in Williamsburg, till his throat was dry, cried and hurt and spoke about what it means to be a Jew, to be godly and to live together with others and to the will of God and keep Shabbos, keep kosher, keep modesty, and don't be embittered and don't leave the Jewish community. But we are not going to have an Israel. That will never, never be. Israel is going to be totally removed from the map. We pray to God that this should happen without any hurt, without any more bloodshed. God, with his almightiness, can bring that it should, just like the end of apartheid happened with through reconciliation and without bloodshed. USSR that sent millions of people to Siberia because they're religious. They forbade religion and they killed and liquidated millions of people. It ended overnight. So we are pleading to God that he should bring an end to this occupation, to this aberration, this non-Jewish state that should be removed from the fabric, from this beautiful fabric that was called the Holy Land, so we can live together in peace. And God will bring us. That's what the Satmar Rebbe pleaded. And that what you misunderstood, somehow you misunderstood, unfortunately, and with all due respect, of what it means that we assert. We are not hoping for Israel. Israel, when the Messiah will come, will be totally off the map. It says so many times in the prophecies that the time will come when the Messiah comes, it will be a barren land and so on. There's many, many verses that the Satmar Rebbe would speak about. There won't be Israel because Israel was built by rebelling against God. That can't be in the land of the Holy Land. That will have to be end. And we pray it should happen speedily and peacefully.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, we'll go to Palestinian Jew. Go ahead with your question.
My own, yes. Hi, Rabbi. I was born and raised in Israel. I used to be a Zionist, and I'm an anti-Zionist, and I very much I follow you quite a bit, and I admire you quite a bit. The question I have for you is I have a multitude of questions for you, but the first thing I want to know is whether did you go to rabbinical school with the same rabbis that are now Zionist rabbis? Did you go through the same? Do you believe the same thing? Do you believe in the Talmud, in the teaching of the Talmud? Did you go to the same the same education?
Well, with the help of the Almighty, thank God, I had the merit of the Almighty blessed me that I was brought up. I was born and grew up in a family that was religious, very religious, and our school systems are automatically, because they're very religious, are anti-Zionist. I hope none of my colleagues turned out to be a rabbi that's part of Zionism. I didn't hear of such a thing, thank God. But no, you see, as a lot of times people don't understand that you will find many times you hear rabbis, the chief rabbis of the Zionists and the settlers are always in your face. But the settlers as a whole, they either come from what they call modern Orthodox, as I was explaining. The word modern is a euphemism for a compromised Judaism. They don't dress modestly like they should. Their kosher is also iffy a lot of times. And every other aspect, the studying of the Torah is iffy. They don't, in our communities, it's day and night as we are required of studying the Torah intensely. While in the modern communities, they'll go to baseball games and football games, and they have classes in studying the Torah, but they also have half the day studying other subjects that they don't concentrate on becoming scholars, and that the whole life is evolves around studying the Torah. As it says, the Torah, that a man is required to study day and night the Torah, and so our students learn what's the absolute necessity of what's required in the laws in the country. But the Zionist, the modern society, is more set on that their children should grow to be lawyers, doctors, scientists, And in that world remind me as
because there's no rabbinical curriculum.
One second, excuse me. Sorry, it's just one question each, by the way. So I apologize.
As Theodor Herz, Dr. Chaim Weizmann said in the 1930s, when they had a meeting about if the Zionists, which were very rich at the time, if they should give from their coffers and they should try to save Jews who were being murdered by the Nazis. And I'm quoting, this is from the Jewish press, October 1802. And this is Chaim Weizmann, the first president of the state of Israel, who was pivotal in the creation of the state. He said, Palestine cannot absorb the Jews of Europe. We want only the best of Jewish youth to come to us. We want only the educated to enter Palestine for the purpose of increasing its culture. The other Jews will have to stay where they are and face whatever fate awaits them. These millions of Jews are dust on the wheels of history and may have to be blown away. We don't want them pouring into Palestine. We don't want Tel Aviv to become another low-grade ghetto. You see, these communities aspire for doctors and lawyers. Their Judaism is a second issue by them, to many of them. I'm not saying all of them, but the whole Judaism is like a second tier. And they say it many times. Or Yitzchak Greenbaum, when they asked, he was the head of the UJA Rescue Committee. And he said, when they asked me, couldn't you give money out of the UJA for the rescue of Jews in Europe? I said, no. I say again, no. One should resist this wave which pushes the Zionist activities to secondary importance. Let them say that I am anti-Semitic. Let them say what they want. I will not demand that the Jewish Agency allocates a sum of 300,000 to 100,000 pounds sterling to help European Jewry. And I think that whoever demands such a thing is performing an anti-Zionist act. You see, in the modern society, Judaism is a different type of Judaism. So they want them to be a cultured Jew. They want them to be that Zionism is what's first class, important first class. So everything has a different set of values. So their values is they use their emotions, and they want to have a state. They shouldn't be a third world country. They should be just like others. So when you're talking about the Zionist communities, and you become a little confused. You see their scholars, and that you should just know, as a rule, the settlers come from either non-religious or we call marginally religious or moderate religious. What they are, meaning that they have a total compromised Judaism. But the fact of the ground is the real religion of Judaism is entirely contradictory and diametrically opposite and antithetical to Zionism. So it's very hard for somebody from the outside to appreciate these things. In my communities, thank God, they're not Zionists. It's very hard to find somebody who fell out and became a Zionist. But the world doesn't understand. It all looks the same. When Ben Gvir comes around and he wears a yarmulke and or Schmutrich, and you say, "Oh, well, it looks like everybody. He looks like a very religious Jew." He's far from a very religious Jew, and the communities that are part of these communities are very far from very religious. It's what we would call a nezem zohav ba'af chazir. It's the pig who has a gold ring in his nose. That's their yarmulke on the head.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. We have just two more questions, and I know we kind of went over just a little bit over time, so we'll hopefully make this a little bit quick. We'll go to Holly. Go ahead, Holly.
Rabbi, you're the man.
Yes.
I want to thank you for giving your time. I really honestly appreciate the education opportunity. And you just said compromise Judaism. And I want to ask you something, because I have thought this whole time that Zionism and Zionists were aware that they were compromising their religion to justify things. And someone was saying to me that they fully, as a community, don't rationalize or understand that they're compromising their values. And you just said that they have a different set, but do they understand the things they're saying are dehumanizing people? Like, do they understand what they're saying to people? I don't know if that makes sense to ask it that way, but
it does. Well, with God's help, you have to understand every person in their lives. The Satan tries to make a person sin, and he tries to fool the person. He's very, very brilliant. He's very smart, and he's evil. So I'm not going to try to justify what the Zionists are doing, God forbid. And for us, it's extremely hurtful to the core, and we cry and hurt with the Palestinian people. As people well know, we give our lives. We go out in the streets day and night in the cold, in the freezing rain, in the snow, in the heat, and we carry this to remember that I got this in Baja Barajna from a refugee camp in Lebanon, where they said to remember the people want to go home to the homes in Jerusalem. We don't forget that. That said, there are people, unfortunately, who are misled because the Zionists have endless well of money. As you well know, maybe many of the Western countries and our country here, they give them billions of dollars, and they use these billions of dollars for the most expensive PR firms and to pay for the education in schools. They try to give money to Williamsburg and our school systems. Wherever they can, they want to buy the hearts and souls of the Jews. So unfortunately, thank God that we catch it. We don't take a penny from them. We refuse to deal with them, and on and on. In fact, we have special charity organizations that covers the people in Palestine and Jerusalem, that they shouldn't have to get any money from the Zionists. Our school systems, people come for charity. They come to the U.S. and we have something special. The Satmar Rebbe started an organization called Hatzalah, which is an umbrella organization to save. Hatzalah means to save, that if schools who don't take money, or individuals who don't take any money from the government, that we should give special charity to them, that they should be able to exist. So basically, because money blinds a person, it says in the Torah, if you take money from somebody, you'll become blinded. They use every type of conniving, and in order to be able to buy the hearts and souls. They use fear mongering. They try to tell the people in occupied Palestine, in Jerusalem, whoever, in Al-Quds, they try to tell them that the Palestinians are a continuation of the Nazis, and if they're gonna eat you alive, they're gonna throw you into the sea. And they try to use this panic in order that people should feel that they have no choice but to stand and not make a free Palestine. So they use every type of. Now, is there people amongst the Jewish people, amongst these communities, who do understand what's going on? Is there people who understand that it's against the religion? Some yes, some no. But it is wrong. It is wrong to support Zionism. It is dead wrong, and Zionism is dead wrong. But there are people, some who don't understand. There are people who do understand. Our job is to speak up and speak out and let the world know that Judaism is not Zionism, it's against Zionism, and to plead with the Jewish people around the world that if they're looking for the truth, they should not fall prey to this Zionist narrative, to the Zionist falsehood. I give them a simple example, a simple issue. I say, when you're looking for truth, when you're looking for a doctor, somebody who has a major operation, he needs a brain surgery. So he Googles, and he finds who has the best record, and he looks for the most competent Harvard graduate, a brain surgeon who will be able to do the operation, because he knows that this is too life-threatening. The same thing when it comes to your spirituality. Why, when it comes to Judaism, is it something cheap? It's our whole soul. It's our life. Our parents and grandparents gave their lives proudly for our religion. Our body is only to encompass our soul. So if you're looking for the truth, then ask yourself, how come it is that in the very religious communities, the ones that give their lives for Judaism, like in Williamsburg, where we pay for we can have free education, public school, and we have large families, average 6-7 children, thank God. And what do the people do? They pay for every single child in private education, and for clothing that's Jewish. You can't just buy off the factory, off the for cheap, and the food, and on and on and on. So we give our lives for religion. Now, if it would be critical for Judaism, this concept of Zionism or a state of Israel, these would be the first to embrace and support and help the state of Israel. Yet, on the contrary, the more the religious, from the streets of New York to Jerusalem, Mea Sha'arim, where the Jews lived and flourished for hundreds of years, the ones that give their lives for God and their religion. These are the ones opposing it. So if somebody's looking for the truth, they should ask themselves, my soul is worth enough, right? That I shouldn't, God forbid, lose it. Why is it that the Ivy League of Judaism, Brisk, I always give that example, and the very school system in Jerusalem, why are all these people anti-Zionist? And the answer is because Zionism is wrong. Zionism is evil, and they're using the religion for evil. It's satanic. Know this, understand this, and then the people. And if you're looking for the truth, you will embrace this, and you will stand up, even though it's uncomfortable. You have to step out of your comfort zone. But this is the facts, and this is the truth.
Thank you so much, Holly, for that question. Thank you, Rabbi, for answering. And we'll go to our final question. Go ahead, Haytham.
Shalom, Rabbi. How you doing, my brother?
Thank God.
I've been following you for a while. I'm proud of what you do. You made a comment that you said you're ashamed of Palestinians, but I want to tell you, I'll be as a Palestinian proud to walk next to you. You're a true face of Judaism, of the religion. The hate comes in towards the Jews is from the Zionist movement, and we both know that. So it's my job as a Palestinian to stand by you also to show the real picture of what real Jews are. And I will support you like you support us 100%. There's no question about it. My question, and I appreciate that you seem like you have a lot of knowledge and history. And just one small question that I have to you. Lately, a lot of propaganda going on. Well, it's been going on for a long time. There's a lot of Jews lives in Iran. They call themselves Iranian Jews. In Morocco, they call themselves Moroccan Jews. They live in peace and harmony in the United States, not in occupied Palestine. My question to you back about Iraq and the Jews that lived in Iraq. Who was the reason for them being expelled and attacked? Was it the Arabs or was it the Zionist regime?
That's a very interesting question. And there was somebody called Giladi. He made a book called Ben Gurion Scandals. I hope he's still alive. I met him many years ago. He was living in Manhattan. And he was a reporter, I believe, a writer. And he wrote this book called Ben Gurion Scandals. Now, he was an Iraqi Jew. And we went to his home because he wrote about how the Zionists went in Iraq and they put bombs on in the synagogues in order to create panic, that the Jews should feel that they're being threatened and they should run away. I've heard, and so I went to visit him. And they were caught, by the way, the ones who did this. So we went to visit him, we interviewed him, we taped him, videotaped him years ago. And we asked him, I wanted to know, how was life in Iraq when you were young? I'm talking many years ago, and he was an older person at the time. He said, what are you talking about? He said, when he was young, they had lived in Iraq. It was beautiful. Jews lived together with Muslims. They told me a few anecdotes. He said, the Jewish people, we have a holiday called Sukkot. And sukkah is a building that, like a little hut that we make. It has to be open from the top, and we to show when God took us out of Egypt, and He put us in, kept us protected with clouds around us, and some people say actual huts. And so we're required to live in this hut for a week. Every Jewish person does this for once a year around the high holidays. And basically, we hang the beautiful things. It's a custom to hang fruits and beautiful things in the sukkah. So he said when he was young, the Arab people, the neighbors, would come and hang their fruits in the sukkah that it should become blessed. He said when the rabbi would go on the street, the Arab children would go by and kiss the corner of his clothes. He said we lived together in peace. And his own father, he said, was upset because he was a rebellious youth, as is unfortunately common, and by youth to be rebellious. And he thought he's going to, and it's a rebellious youth. Some of them, and maybe many of them around the world, looked at Zionists as this great release, escape, because the Zionists went and they showed that they were these big heroes. They were gun-toting, and they're going to till the land, and they have these pictures of them, the pioneers, and on and on. So unfortunately, people who wanted to rebel went and joined them. My mother, by the way, told me, just an aside, that in Poland, of blessed memory, that she remembers when somebody became a Zionist, they would actually mourn as if the child had died. But anyway, back to this in Iraq. So he said this Giladi said when he was a child, his father begged him, go, don't join them. But he did. Later, he became disenchanted from them. He became very disappointed. And so he wrote this whole book about what they did. And he said, would I be able to go back and live in Iraq like we used to live? But it was the Zionists who created this atmosphere that the Jews panicked and left. Now, but also it was the Zionists who created a hate and a mistrust of Jews. They tried, they wanted that the Arabs should think that every Jew is in support of this occupation, and the Arab and the Muslims, they consider themselves an ummah, one nation. And therefore they looked at the Jews as something to do with the Zionists, and some Jews were maybe truly in danger. So we have both issues, that thanks to Zionism, purely thanks to Zionism, we have that all the communities in Iraq, in Egypt, in Lebanon, on and on in Jordan, and on and on and on. And even in the countries that you mentioned, in Morocco and in Iran, and all these were large, flourishing Jewish countries. What happened? They disappeared. Why did they disappear? Not because of some difference between Judaism and Islam, because of Zionism. Purely because of Zionism. So just contemplate this. When Zionism accuses people of being anti-Semitic, let's ask ourselves, who is the textbook definition of anti-Semitism? Who is the personification of anti-Semitism, if not Zionism, the state of Israel? They are the ones that caused that all these Arab lands has lost their Jewish communities. They've uprooted from the Jews their connection to God. They've transformed Judaism into nationalism, that even the ones full of Jews that are living under their control over there don't keep the Sabbath, don't keep the 10 Commandments. That's our covenant with God that we died for these thousands of years. Zionism has caused this eradication and the divide and our estrangement from the Almighty. And they have caused the blood of the Palestinian people, they're pouring the blood of the Palestinian people. And the Jewish people who are opposing them, they're busy assassinating and arresting. And the ones even who are who they have, their Zionists, are dying because of their cause. So who is anti-Semitic, if not the Zionist state of Israel, for a selfish, flawed political endeavor that nowhere in the Torah does it require of us to die for? This is the cause of so much bloodshed and hate around the world. Remove this impediment to peace, and we'll be able to go back to our Judaism, serving God and living in peace and harmony with our neighbors.
Inshallah, we will see Israel completely dismantled very soon in the coming years. I thank you so much, Rabbi Weiss, for being with us today. Very honored, very, very honored to have you and to be able to listen to this and gain this knowledge that many people may not understand and know. So I thank you for joining us, and thank you for answering everyone's questions. There's about like 15 people that want to come up and ask questions. There's so many, but hopefully next time we can have both you and Rabbi Feldman join us together, and we can just strictly have like a Q&A, because so many people have questions. And again, I thank you again for joining us, and we hope to live to see a world free of Israel and free of Zionism.
Inshallah, that God should help. God is almighty. He can make it happen speedily and peacefully without any more bloodshed. And in the blink of an eye, we hope this will happen. We are so looking for that free Palestine and ultimately the revelation of God, where all humanity will all be serving God in harmony.
Inshallah. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.